They've closed the doors, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for coming and spending your afternoon with me. I saw several of you at a session earlier, so you're probably like me and haven't had lunch yet, and you're going to run to the closing session. So I do appreciate you taking the time out in your schedule to come. I'm from the National Council of Teachers of English in Urbana, Illinois, and I'm project manager for the ReadWriteThink.org website. So actually, I'm Lisa Fink from ReadWriteThink. It's kind of fun and it rhymes. What we're going to do today is I'm going to switch back and forth between PowerPoint and the live site. I see many of you brought your devices, so you can follow along with me however works best with your learning style. If you want to follow along with me, you can. If you also want to explore on your own as we go, I definitely appreciate that too. And if you find anything that you want to share with the rest of the group, please feel free to do that. Along the way, at any time, if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know as well. I did mention earlier that my PowerPoint and many of the handouts that were on the back table are available on the ISTE site associated with this session, so please feel free to take and use as you need to. So what we're going to do in this session is we're going to take a look at ReadWriteThink.org and the materials and the resources that we have available and how you can incorporate those tools across the curriculum. So how many of you are familiar with the ReadWriteThink.org website? Fantastic. So nice to see so many of those hands. So the ReadWriteThink.org website is a free website for teachers and students, and it's put together between the International Reading Association in Newark, Delaware, the National Council of Teachers of English in Urbana, Illinois. And it's free and available to everyone because we get support from the Verizon Foundation as part of their Thinkfinity.org consortium. How many of you are familiar with Thinkfinity? Oh, a nice amount of hands as well. That's great. So what the Verizon Foundation has done is they've generously provided grants to 9 content area associations so that we could create 8 free websites for teachers and students in the different disciplines. So I work with IRA on an English language arts site, but we have sites in math and in science and in humanities. So it's a really nice service that's available for free for teachers and their students. So since so many of you are already familiar with ReadWriteThink.org, I'm really not going to dig into the site too much. I'm not going to do a site overview. I'm going to give you some highlights, and then we're going to dig deeper into some parts and pieces that maybe you're a little bit unfamiliar with. So ReadWriteThink, what does it have to offer? There's a keyword and filter search on every page of the site. So if you're looking for a particular resource or title or author, you can find it. You can further filter down those results to find something that will specifically meet your needs. We're known for our lesson plans and teaching resources for students kindergarten through 12th grade. How many of you are elementary folks? That's me, I'm an elementary teacher. How many of you are middle school folks? Nice amount. How many of you are high school? Okay, another nice amount. How many of you work with pre-service teachers or student teachers? That's what I do as well. School library media specialists? Fantastic. School administrators? Tech coaches? Did I leave anybody out? I feel like we're pretty well represented in here, so thank you for giving me that. I'll try to show you things today that span those different grade levels and things that should be applicable to your role as well. So we've got lesson plans and teaching resources that span all those grades. The part of our site that's the most popular and probably the most well-known are our online student interactive tools, which we're going to dig into and really explore. I see several of you on iPads. I've got to tell you, and you probably already know and could tell me, that most of our tools are flash-based and therefore currently don't work on the iPad. We know that, and we're working to fix that. We've built 2 mobile apps that we'll take a look at. And then we're also working this summer and winter to translate those flash-based tools to be platform agnostic. So no matter what device you're using, if you're on a laptop, a desktop, a tablet, a Kindle, that you'll be able to, you and your students will be able to access those resources. So those of you on your tablets following along, some things may not work as I would want them to, but please know that we're working to fix that. We've listened to your feedback, and we're working on that. A couple other parts and pieces of the site. We've got classroom resources by grade level. We've got so many materials on our site that sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming, even with that keyword and filter search. So we've broken it down, so if you're a 3rd and 4th grade teacher, we've selected some resources that would be applicable for you and your students. We keep track of the list of the most popular resources on the site. When I was in the classroom, I was fascinated by this because I wanted to see what other people were finding that maybe I wasn't finding and maybe I needed to know more about. Also on the site, you can sign up for RSS feeds, so you can get notifications when we publish new resources on the site. You can email almost all of our materials to yourself if you're working at home, to a colleague if you know they're working on a particular topic and you find a resource. You can share our resources on social media. I've got more social media links later on in the presentation. And then we also invite comments on all of our resources. We want to know how you're using our tools, our resources, what changes and adaptations you've made, what problems you may have had, and of course, whatever praise you want to share as well. If you're following this PowerPoint along on your device, all of these links are live as well if you want to check them out even further. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to really look at the tools and resources that we have on ReadWriteThink and how those can be used to address the NETS S, which are the student standards. How many of you are familiar with the NETS for students? So a number of you. So I'll go over this kind of quickly. So they're the standards for evaluating the skills and knowledge students need to learn effectively and live productively in an increasingly global and digital world. So then we've got 6 bullet points there. They include creativity and innovation, communication and collaboration, research and information fluency, critical thinking, problem solving, and decision making, digital citizenship, and technology, operations, and concepts. So what we're going to do is we're going to break those down a little bit further into some really easy to see and understand language. And then we're going to look at what ReadWriteThink resources we have that address those standards. So that'll be the first part of our presentation. And then the second part are some other things that I think are fun and interesting and would be really motivating for students that I also wanted to share. I've also got some sneak peeks at some things coming up as well. Again, please, if you have any questions or need any clarifications as we go along, let me know. So the first standard, creativity and innovation, the language from the standard states students demonstrate creative thinking, construct knowledge, and develop innovative products and process using technology. A simple way to look at that one is they're going to make it. Students are going to make something. They're going to use technology to show their creativity. So here's an example of a ReadWriteThink lesson plan that can be used to address that creativity and innovation standard. So the lesson plan title is Book Report Alternative, Glog That Book. So how many of you use glogs during the classroom? A number of you do. I love it because it's so visual and it invites students to make so many decisions and choices and personalize. So in this lesson plan, which we'll take a look at, students identify the elements of fiction and books that they've read, and they're going to create a glog, which is an interactive multimedia poster, and then share those glogs. So we'll take a look at the lesson, and then we'll take a look at a sample glog so you can get a better idea of what it is that we are talking about. I will give you a quick overview of our lesson plan format, just so you're familiar with the components of it, so you can fully use the resources that we have available. Those of you who are familiar with the site know that all the lessons on our site follow the same basic format. So we identify the grade level that the lesson plan is applicable for. So this one is grades 5 through 8. Does that mean we only want you to use it with 5th through 8th graders? Absolutely not. We hope that you would adapt it and use it with your high school students. We hope that you find some nuggets that you can use with your intermediate students. We really want you to take all of the resources that we have available on the site and make them your own and really customize them to your teaching style, the needs of your students, the requirements that you might have in your school or your district. We tell about how long this lesson will take to implement. This one is 5 50-minute sessions. Obviously, that can be arranged differently. If you teach in block scheduling, you would have more time, so you would have fewer sessions. If you work with younger students, you might not want to use 50-minute sessions. All of this is just a guideline for you. I will tell you this lesson plan was written by a school library media specialist at a school close to where I am. And I'll give a quick plug to tell you that all of the resources on the ReadWriteThink site are written by teachers and educators in the field. So if you've got a great lesson plan teaching idea, you can share it with us. We can work with you on the creative process. We send it through a double-blind peer review process. With other folks in the field, we work with the teachers on revision, and then when they're published, the teachers get a stipend, which is pretty nice too. So I'll talk to you a little bit more about that as we go. So as I said, the lesson plans follow the same basic format. We start out with an overview, giving an idea about what the lesson plan is about, what might be happening there. We highlight some featured resources that are integral to the lesson plan. One thing that makes ReadWriteThink different from other free lesson plan sites is we try as often as we can to have all of the resources you need to teach the lesson plan available. If we say that there's a graphic organizer for the students, we provide it. If you're assessing their work using a rubric, it's there. So we try as often as we can to have everything there. There's times where you're going to need to get a piece of literature from the library or from your classroom collection, but as many things as we can, we've provided and linked there for you. The next section of the lesson plan I feel maybe overlooked sometimes, but I think is really important. It's the theory to practice section of the lesson plan. And it's really the rationale behind teaching the lesson plan or the research basis. So if your administrator comes and asks you, why are you using these logs with your students? Or if a parent says, how is this helping my children's literacy? You've got that research basis there and available for you to use. The theory to practice section is based on NCTE and IRA publications, so journal articles, book chapters, position statements. So it's really the meat behind the teaching idea there. Something that is pretty important, we believe also, is aligning the lesson plans to learning standards. All of the lesson plans on our site are based on the national standards for English language arts that were written by NCTE and IRA in 1995, 1996, which in the education world, that's a really long time ago. So they're still the foundation for our lesson plans, but we know that that's not the standards world that we live in today. So we've taken another step and we've aligned almost all of the resources on our site to individual state standards. And then for the states that have adopted the Common Core state standards, we've done a further alignment to those as well. So I'll show you how you get to that. So I clicked on the Standards tab. You can choose your state from a pull-down menu, and I teach in Illinois, so I'll select Illinois. And then you have an option to choose what grade level. So as I said, this lesson plan spans grades 5 through 8, so you can choose whatever grade is most applicable to you, and then take a look at those alignments. So I'll choose grade 7. And then what I can see here are the Illinois Common Core state standards that are addressed in this lesson plan. A question we often get when I share this is, can I tell you what standard I need, and can you tell me what resources you have available? And the answer is not quite yet. So for right now, if you have a resource, you can see how it's aligned to the Common Core state standards. We don't have that reverse process quite yet, but stay tuned because we know that that's what folks are looking for. If you need to show evidence of this, you can also print this or keep a digital copy along with the lesson plan to show the alignment, or it's always available associated with that specific resource. As I said, all of the resources you need, most of the resources you need to teach the lesson plan are available. So we've listed them here and linked them. We also have a preparation section telling you what you might need to do before you start this lesson plan. Do you need to make copies? Do you need to get the computer lab or reserve time with your iPad cart? Do the students need to read or have prior knowledge? So we try to have all of that information for you as well before you dig into the actual instructional plan itself. The instructional plan starts with students They're written to be clear and measurable and tied to the assessment piece. As I mentioned, all of these resources are written by folks in the field. We ask that when they write lesson plans, that they write them to be really explicit. We ask that they envision that their audience is novice teachers in their first few years of teaching. So that way all the steps and things you need to think through are really laid out. A novice teacher could feel successful with this. A pre-service teacher, a more veteran teacher can take and adapt to meet his or her own teaching style, needs of their students, have it match their classroom culture, and so on. So after the instructional plan, there's a student assessment section where, again, those rubrics are listed. Checklists might be there, guiding questions to discuss with the students. That's all there. Sometimes there's assessment that happens before, during, and after the lesson plan, so we've provided information about that. Oftentimes there's an extension section where if you want to take this idea a little bit further, you can. If you want to take the premise but maybe make it a little bit different, we've provided that information too. We identify related resources, so things that are similar to this topic that you might be able to use or find more information. And then we also have a comment section that I mentioned earlier, where we hope that people give some feedback, give some suggestions, talk about adaptations that they've made. So we really appreciate this as well. We're working, here's another sneak peek, we're working on taking the adaptation that we know teachers do with our lesson plans and making that be more visible for other users. So that's something, hopefully, that might be coming in the next year or so. So keep an eye out for that. So that's what a lesson plan looks like. And again, this one was on glogs. And so I want to show you a sample glog that was created after a student read a text. So instead of just doing a book report, I read this book, here were the characters, this was the setting, I really enjoyed it, this invites the students to, and not everything's loading, this invites the students to really take those parts and pieces that they might put in a written book report and make it visual and really make it their own. I'm bummed that this isn't all loading, but I can tell you what was here. So you've got a summary that was written. You can incorporate images, so the book cover is here. There you can bring in video, so potentially if a book has been turned into a film, you could have a piece there. There can be audio, so it can be a student talking, an interview with an author, pieces of music can be brought in. Obviously students can change the colors, the backgrounds, all sorts of things. So you can see how this could be a visual poster instead of a more traditional book report, if you will. Several of you said you used Glogster with your students. Is anybody willing to share how you do that, what you've done? In a previous session I did, actually right before this, I shared a glog that was done after students had studied natural disasters and things that had happened. And so the video that was incorporated was just really incredible and really showed the students' knowledge of the topic. Oh, something was there and it was circled. The next nets for students that we're going to take a look at is the piece on communication and collaboration, where students use digital media and environments to communicate and work collaboratively, including at a distance, to support individual learning and contribute to the learning of others. So to simplify it, we're asking students to say it, and we're asking students to share it. So overall, we're asking students to use technology to communicate and collaborate. And that really is the college and career-ready piece that we're all talking about, and a lifelong skill. So the ReadWriteThink resource that we can take a look at here with communication and collaboration is a lesson plan titled A Collaboration of Sights and Sounds Using Wikis to Catalog Protest Songs. Do any of you use wikis with your students, have them create them or use them for information? Is anybody willing to share how you use wikis? Oh, great idea. For those of you who couldn't hear, in her class, students use wikis as their portfolios. So that really makes that learning obvious and shareable with others. Was your hand up?
Our fifth graders just did a project where they created a wiki that provided information about coming from fourth grade to fifth grade for the incoming fourth grade.
Oh, very nice. So in this fifth grade classroom, the fifth graders create a wiki explaining the transition between fourth grade to fifth grade that they can share with fourth graders before they make that transition. So there's all sorts of different examples and ideas. And so in this lesson plan, students catalog protest songs using a wiki. So we'll take a look at an example of what an entry would be, and this one's on Wikipedia, and it's using the Kanye West song, Diamonds from Sierra Leone. So it's taking music and it's taking songs and it's looking at the messages of those songs and how they can be used in the classroom to further the learning that the students are doing there. The next, one of the nets that we'll take a look at is research and information fluency, which says students apply digital tools to gather, evaluate, and use information, which, simplifying it, it's students finding information and then doing something with that information. So using technology for research to show information literacy. And when I was in the classroom teaching research, and inquiry was by far one of my most favorite things that I got to do. And I teamed up with our school library media specialist, and we did an entire unit on research where we did lots and lots of modeling for the students and working alongside them before we started our state study. That was a big requirement for them in 3rd and 4th grade. So this is something I'm super passionate about. The example that I wanted to show you from ReadWriteThink today is called Digitally Telling the Story of Greek Figures. So it's a lesson plan where students learn about Greek gods, heroes, and creatures through digital storytelling, which is produced by the students who have learned those research techniques. So for the students, their favorite part is the digital story that they create at the end. But for the teacher, it's evident all along the way what the students have learned, what they've comprehended, what connections they've made. And of course, the product at the end is really cool, but there's so much assessment that the teacher can do along the way in addition to just looking at that final piece. So we'll take a look a little bit at the lesson plan and some of the associated resources with it. How many of you teach ancient Greece and Rome in your classrooms? I see a number of you. This, again, is a middle school lesson that was a jointly taught unit between the social studies classroom and then also using the resources and the personnel in the library to really team teach. And then also the English language arts teacher was brought in as well. So it's fantastic to see teachers in the different disciplines working together for a common cause, and it helps scaffold that information and that learning for the students as well when they're getting the same kinds of information from many different people and in different ways. So this lesson plan uses Microsoft Photo Story for the students to create their final projects. How many of you use Microsoft Photo Story with your students? I see a lot of hands. Does anybody want to share how they use that tool? Yes. Fantastic. So the example was students create their final research paper that's done in Microsoft Photo Story that goes to that class wiki that we heard about earlier. And then it's also on the teacher's website, so it's available for parents and family and community to take a look at that. And I think it's really important to make that learning visible to people. And it really helps students, my opinion, helps motivate students when they know that they have an authentic audience that's going to be taking a look at the work and the pieces that they create. So here it's the research piece, that inquiry piece where students are researching about ancient Greece and using those basic research skills and then turning it into that digital product at the end. So we'll take a look at one of those.
Today, you're going to be learning about the ancient Greek gods and goddesses. The ancient Greeks were polytheistic. This is a big fancy word with a really easy meaning. If you break the word polytheism down into its word parts, poly meaning many, theism meaning the belief in a god, then you can figure out that the Greeks believed in many different gods. In fact, the Greeks believed in hundreds of different gods, but there were 12 main gods and goddesses, and they were known as the Olympians because they lived on Mount Olympus, a real mountain in central Greece.
I'll go ahead and stop that there, but I love all the parts and pieces of it because the students had a checklist, they had requirements for what needed to be in their research report, their project, but how they did that, they could really personalize and make their own. I love the students' voices that's added in here, the animation that goes along with it. It really allows for students to customize and create and show their own personality in projects like this, which I really appreciate. So that's an example of Microsoft Photo Story. The next NET standard that's listed is critical thinking, problem solving, and decision making. So students use critical thinking skills to plan and conduct research, manage projects, solve problems, and make informed decisions using appropriate digital tools and resources. So simplifying that, we're asking students to solve it. We're asking them to use technology to think critically, solve problems, and be decision makers. And that whole decision-making process is so critical for students to learn how to do and then apply that in everything that they do. So the next ReadWriteThink resource we're going to take a look at is Vote for Me, Making Presidential Commercials Using Avatars. It's not an election, it's not a major election year coming up, but this would be great to do with local elections, community elections, if your students are involved in school board elections, things like that. If they have student council or student senate elections, they can do that. So here's a lesson plan that can be used when it's timely, or a lesson plan that could be adapted for another piece or time with your students. So this has students researching political platforms of past presidents, or it could be current candidates. And they use primary sources and other resources, and then students create commercials for these presidents using Voki. How many of you use the product Voki? A lot more hands than I've seen before. Is anybody willing to share how they use Voki? Yes? That's a great idea. And the example given is that she has students use Voki, the avatars from Voki, to introduce themselves to the class, which is a fun way to do it. Any other examples you want to share? I'll share an example with you. A sample Voki.
My fellow Americans, I stand for change you can believe in. The first change I promise is to bring our troops immediately home from Iraq. We will withdraw 1 to 2 units per month so that in 16 months all our servicemen will be home. Secondly, I will change our healthcare system. All Americans will be eligible for healthcare. Third, I promise to change our educational system. I will increase funding to Head Start, the nation's preschool program, and recruit youth into the teaching profession. Together we can change America. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
So students had to have researched the political platform, the talking points of this candidate at the time. Then they had to write up that into a speech or a commercial, which then they could choose an avatar, customize it, but they had to input the script that they had written for this avatar, this character, to speak and to say. So the students obviously showed their research, because those aren't things most likely that a middle school student would just know. So they did their research, they were able to compile it into a commercial, and then share it with other people. Another one of the nets for students is looking at digital citizenship. So students need to understand human, cultural, and societal issues related to technology and practice legal and ethical behavior. Something that's so important as students leave their digital footprint, and something I think that we really need to take time to really discuss and have the students learn what all of that means and what the implications are. So one aspect of digital citizenship, to simplify it, is to protect it. So we need to teach students that when they use technology, they need to remember the rules of digital citizenship. And one way they can do that is using the ReadWriteThink lesson plan, Students as Creators Exploring Copyright. So this lesson gives students the tools they need to consider the ethical issues surrounding use and ownership of copyrighted materials. And this includes a copyright checklist that we'll take a look at. This lesson plan was written in collaboration with the School Library Association. So it was working again with school library media specialists on the issues and concerns that they have with students using resources and materials and how we can better teach them about copyright. So we can take a look at the copyright checklist that's available for students as they're working on creating something using the technology, using multimedia. Slowly. I was in a session earlier in this conference looking at uses of music and video and images in student work and how you can teach students about what you can use, what's fair use. If you transform something, you can use a lot more of it than if you're simply replicating a copyrighted piece of material. So it's something that I think is really important for students and I think is changing all the time. So we as educators need to really be informed about what the rules and laws and best practices are. I'll try one quick thing to look for our checklist. Here we go. So here's something you can share with students as they're working on these multimedia projects. And it's really a flow chart. Can I use it? So did I create it myself without copying? Yes. Am I sure? Yes. Then I can use it. Is it a type of material that's not covered by copyright? So maybe something that's in the public domain. If that's true, then yes, I can use it. So it really makes students think about the decisions that they're making while creating some of these multimedia projects. How do you address these issues of copyright and using things when working with your students? Kids love to grab images and music and video, and it really enhances what they're doing, and so I think it's just important that we talk to them about how they use it and how they attribute that work as well. Absolutely, and the point that was just made is model it yourself. So if you're creating presentations or showing things to students, make sure you're doing it the right way as well. Very good point. It's in the lesson plan. It's in the lesson plan, Students as Creators Exploring Copyright. So I'll open that up and we'll take a look at where it is. So it's actually, if you get to that lesson plan, if you type in the title in the search engine or if you're following along in the PowerPoint, it's actually one of the featured resources here. Can I use it? Checklist for copyright clearance. And it's on the it's on the PowerPoint as well. If you go on the ISTE website, there's a and if you search for this session, if you search by my name or the time or keywords, the PowerPoint's there, and the handouts I had in the back are there as well. Yes? You know, that is something the question is copyright different in different countries? And that's something I honestly don't know. I would assume that probably it is. So are you thinking if you teach in a different country or if you're using materials from a different country? Okay. Does anybody in the audience know the answer to that question? True. Makes sense. But that's definitely something that I hadn't thought about before. Okay, the next one of the nets for students that we'll take a look at is technology operations and concepts. So students demonstrate a sound understanding of technology concepts, systems, and operations. Or to simplify it, students need to use it. So using technology devices and programs that will actually help improve the student learning. So we've got a lot of lesson plans on the site that address that, but the one that I picked for us to look at is a lesson plan called Technology and Copyright Law, A Future Perspective. And this, again, was one of the lesson plans written in collaboration with the Association of School Librarians. And so students research and report instances of how copyright laws have adapted to encompass new technologies, because copyright used to just be, you couldn't copy this entire chapter from a book, but now with so many things being online and digital, and more available than they were before, how do we need to change how we use things and how we view things to incorporate that? After the students have done that research, then they're invited to write articles using the ReadWriteThink printing press, which we'll take a look at. And the students' articles will predict copyright issues that may arise with new and future technologies. So the printing press is actually one of the newer online interactive student tools. And again, if you're following along on an iPad, my apologies. So if you could follow along with us here. The printing press walks students through the publication process of a newspaper, a brochure, or a flyer, sign, or poster. So it helps give them a template to fill in and follow through, and then they end up with something that looks like this for a newspaper, a brochure, or a poster, sign, or flyer. This is one of the tools that's available on ReadWriteThink for free. It's one of 14 tools that students can save their work as they go along. I had a one-computer classroom, and we had a computer lab that I maybe could get every 3 or 4 weeks. And we only had a cart of Alpha Smarts. We didn't have a laptop cart or anything. And so finding computer time for all of my students was pretty important. And if you only had a 20-minute block, you probably aren't going to finish publishing a newspaper in 20 minutes. So we've added the ability to save students' work as a draft, save a final copy, and then students can either email that draft to themselves to work on at home, they can email it to their teacher, or they can email and save their final copies as well that can be used in a portfolio or as part of the assessment process. So this is just an example of one of the student interactive tools on ReadWriteThink, and we can dig deeper into some of those as well. So how do the nets for students and the Common Core state standards, how do those relate? And I know, at least in a lot of the reading and conversations I've been part of, people are really trying to figure out where the technology pieces are, and there's not a separate technology strand in the Common Core state standards. And so really you need to look and you need to see how technology can support the learning that's being asked for in those. I know there's a ton of text on these slides, so please feel free to take a look at them. I don't want to read them to you, but I've got a couple of points that when you go through the Common Core state standards, here's some key words that are mentioned in there: publishing, collaboration, evaluation, and integration. And those are all things that we've seen talked about in the nets for students. So is there room for technology in the classroom now? Absolutely, because that would be ridiculous if it wasn't. Are there standards specifically saying use technology to incorporate this or to teach this? Not necessarily, but we know that these are the kinds of skills and decisions that students need to make, and technology is absolutely the right way to do that. So the Common Core state standards don't just suggest novel technology use as a way to engage students, but rather requires learners to make complex decisions about how, when, and why to use technology. And that's just something we educators must do as well. So it gets back to that modeling piece that was mentioned earlier. So ReadWriteThink and Common Core, I showed you earlier how you could look at the alignments for the lesson plans and resources on the site. knowing that there's a 15% differential for each state, and not all states have adopted the Common Core state standards yet, but we're keeping those standards in mind with the resources and materials that we have on the site. So in addition to the things that are specific to the NETs, I wanted to show some other things that you probably already do in your classroom or personally, and how those different things are represented on the ReadWriteThink site. So Twitter, I feel like most of the students that I work with now are getting off Facebook a little bit and using Twitter a lot more. Just the opinion I have of the kiddos I work with. So we've incorporated Twitter and the idea of Twitter and micro networks on the ReadWriteThink site. So here's a lesson plan: using microblogging and social networking to explore characterization and style. So here we ask students to assume the persona of a character in a piece of literature that they're reading. It could be a film that they've watched, and then taking on that persona, having them tweet out as that person. So what would they say? What would their status update read? So here, we'll take a look at it. And here's an example, too, of a lesson plan that gives some examples of the piece of literature that could be used or the film that could be used. But for sure, it can be customized to whatever you're doing. So the example in this lesson plan is it's based on the text Emma by Jane Austen, but of course you could use this with any novel that you're teaching in your classroom. We have another lesson plan on the site using Twitter with Lord of the Flies. So if you have only 140 characters and you want to communicate with people on the island or off the island, what kinds of things would you say? So it really makes students make decisions about what kind of language they're using and the types of communications that they're having. How many of you have your students blog? A handful of you. How many of you teachers blog? A handful as well. So we've got several resources on blogging. So the one example I have here is, what if Anne Frank, instead of her diary, what if she had a blog? So how can you take on social roles through online writing? So it really has students look at the genre of writing and then how that translates to different formats that you would have. And again, thinking about tone, thinking about purpose, thinking about audience. So we can take a look at this and take a look at an example blog post that might come from Anne Frank. We'll take a look actually at a checklist that can be given to students as they create their blog posts. So different things to think of. So it's not just the content that goes up there, but the layout. How does it look? Why are you making those decisions? How would the character think and display his or her information? Texting. How many of you have bring your own device schools where students can use their phones or their iPods or iPads or tablets? A number of you. So here I mentioned the use of Twitter with Lord of the Flies. We have something too with texting and thinking about, again, if you've got a limited number of characters and you need to communicate with somebody, what's important, how do you get your message across, and how is your message conveyed to others. Those of you who have bring your own device environments, does anybody want to share how you use those, what you do with the students? The school my children go to, you're not allowed to bring devices, not even e-readers. So I'm always anxious to hear how others use them. Did somebody start to share? Yeah, that's exactly right. Prezi. So we've got some lesson plans using Prezi. Do any of you use Prezi with your students? Oh, a nice handful. So another presentation mode. So this is an example of blending the past with today's technology, using Prezi to prepare for historical fiction. So taking a genre that might be hard for some students to understand because you really need to understand the time period. And how can you use that as a pre-teaching method before you dig into the historical piece? So this is looking at decades of historical novels and how you can share those with students. Animoto is another common tool used with students. And so here's a lesson plan where students can animate that haiku. So instead of just writing a traditional piece of poetry called haiku, they can animate it and really bring that piece to life. And they can incorporate not only text, but music as well. Facebook many times is blocked by schools and firewalls. So we've got a couple of lesson plans that use the idea of Facebook and social networking, but in a safe way that can be done at school. So there's a program called Farcebook. Are any of you familiar with that? Which is like Facebook. And again, where students can, instead of a traditional book report, they can take on a persona and imagine what that person's Facebook page may look like. So again, it's a book report alternative using that. And then we've got another one with a similar idea, not using the program Farcebook, but doing it differently online, using a PowerPoint presentation or other presentation software. And this lesson uses the example of in the American Revolution, what if George Washington had a Facebook page? What would his posts look like now? I've got to say, personally, I'm a huge fan of Mad Men, and there's a site right now that every week gives a summary of the episode as if it was done on Facebook, where people check in, who likes what, who comments on what. So it's a place where we know kids and adults are, and so incorporating that motivation, hopefully, into the classroom. Podcasting, this is something great for the students to do, and so it's teaching them not only how to podcast, but how they can record their knowledge and information to share out with you. So this lesson plan that's linked here is having students listen to the War of the Worlds podcast broadcast and then create their own audio drama that they can record and share with others. We've also got some podcasting resources on having students create public service announcements. So you can do that just with audio, or you can add the video in there as well. Windows Movie Maker, do any of you use this in your classroom? Not very many. So we've got a lesson plan on students making those video public service announcements using Windows Movie Maker, which is available on most PCs. Pinterest, we're investigating uses of Pinterest in relationship to ReadWriteThink. How many of you use Pinterest? How many of you use Pinterest professionally? A handful. How many of you use it personally? A nice number. So we're trying to figure out what's the best way to represent ReadWriteThink on Pinterest and to also see how others are pinning our resources on the site. So stay tuned for more on that. And we're also working to make our resources be more pinnable because sometimes our images don't work very well there. Our online interactive tools, or known as our student materials, as I said, those are the most popular part of our site. We've got almost 60 of those Flash-based tools that we're working to make platform agnostic. I showed you the printing press. Have any of you been playing along on the site and found any of those student interactive tools that you would like to share? The Comic Creator is probably the most popular tool on our site. It's so antiquated, but it's a great idea of having students create comics or graphic novels or visual representations of their learning. That's something we're looking to update. We've got an online tool that's a persuasion map that walks students through how to write a persuasive piece. We're working to adapt that some for students who are working on argumentative pieces of writing. We've got an entire slew of poetry interactive tools. We've got graphic organizers. If we've got time, I can dig into those with you. Otherwise, they're all linked here for you as well. And as I mentioned on the printing press, many of our tools you can save as a draft or your final version and be able to share those out with people. Mobile apps. We have 2 mobile apps that are available right now from ReadWriteThink. Are any of you familiar with our mobile apps? Nice, brand new, breaking news. So we have 2 apps that are currently just available in the iTunes store. Hopefully in the next month they'll be available in Google Play as well. We've got one, it's Word Mover, so it's magnetic poetry, the idea of magnetic poetry and manipulating language. And then we've also got an app on trading cards, creating trading cards like baseball cards that you can use to make for book characters or vocabulary or even as study guides for students. So those are both available on the site. I can take you real quick to show you. So you can get it from iTunes straight from our site. We actually have videos that show how to use these apps so you can share with your students or you can inform yourself before you work with the students. And then we've identified what resources on the site use that tool as well. Because not everybody has mobile devices like this. These are also Flash-based tools on our site as well. And like I said, the Android version coming soon. We've talked a lot about teaching with technology, and so we've worked to put together a strategy guide series on our site about teaching with technology. So strategy guides on the site, are any of you familiar with those? They're in the professional development section of the site, and they are what they say they are. They guide educators through different strategies in the classroom. So we've got some on how to differentiate instruction, how to work with English language learners, how to teach fluency and comprehension. And so we've got an entire series about teaching with technology. So if you want to use Glogster in the classroom, how do you do it? If you want to use Animoto or Prezi, we've got specific information talking about the strategies, talking about the software, and then giving examples of how you can use those in the classroom. We've also got things that aren't as specific. So how to teach reading online. That's a completely different, it takes a completely different skill set than reading a piece of printed text. Online safety is really important for students as well. We're really looking at this area and seeing if teaching with technology is the right way to go, or do we need to maybe take this and build it out and have something on mobile learning and teaching with mobile devices. So that's something we're working on. And as I mentioned, all the content on the site comes from folks like you in the field. So if you're interested in working with us on that, please let me know. Hidden gems on the site. We have a calendar of events, which is my favorite part of the site. The standards alignment we talked about. We have a section of the site called Site Demonstrations you can get to from the link here or in the global navigation on the site, where we've got videos and PowerPoints and session presentations that you can use to learn more about the site or to share with other people. Same thing with our promotional materials. We've got handouts, logos, banner ads you can borrow if you want to share the site with other people. We have an entire section of our site devoted to out of school. So if kiddos want to work with their families on learning activities, we've got those. If somebody runs an after-school program or a Boys and Girls Club or a mentoring program, we have resources available there. We have a number of resources that have been translated to Spanish. I worked in a school where 30% of our population were native Spanish speakers. So we've translated some of those parent and after-school activities and then tips for parents and families. We've translated those into Spanish so they can go home with those families as well. We're growing the video offerings that we have on the site. We'd love to have some model teaching videos as well as videos of kiddos performing, sharing, as well as audio of students. So if that's something you're interested in sharing with the site, definitely let me know. We have 2 podcast series that we publish every month. One is called Chatting About Books, and it's for students and teachers kindergarten through 5th grade. And then we've got a second podcast series called Text Messages for students and teachers 6th grade through 12th grade. So those are fun to take a listen to as well. Coming soon to ReadWriteThink, I've talked to you about the Common Core State Standards alignment. We know we need to go a step further, so we're working to come up with a collection of exemplar lesson plans and resources that talk and show what the Common Core state standards are asking for. So really, what does close reading look like, and how can I do it in my classroom? How is argumentative writing different from persuasive writing? What do I need to do with informational text that might be different than what I've done in the past? So look for that. We're actually working with some National Writing Project teaching fellows on that this summer and fall. STEM. We really want to increase the amount of STEM literacy resources that we have on our site, so we're working with folks at the association, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and their website, Science Netlinks, to identify reading, writing, listening, speaking in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and how we can support that learning across the content areas. I mentioned we're looking at expanding what we have on mobile learning and teaching with mobile devices, and so I'd love to hear from any of you on that. The educator involvement, writing those lesson plans, reviewing those lesson plans, developing those professional materials like those strategy guides, adding video, audio, or other technology, joining our review panel. Those are all ways for folks to get involved and get recognized monetarily for that work that they do with a site. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Those of you familiar with Thinkfinity, we maintain 2 groups in the Thinkfinity community. We've got a reading and language arts group, and we're also part of the parents and families group. Here's my contact information, my email, stuff I've done on the site, as well as my Twitter handle. And I'm supposed to remind you that there's a survey available for all the sessions at the program on the app, on the mobile website, or on the conference website. I rushed through the end. Does anybody have any questions or things that they found that they want to share with the rest of the group? Absolutely. Thank you for coming. I know the closing session starts soon. Safe travels to those of you traveling home today. I appreciate you taking time with me today. If you want to chat more, I'd be glad to talk with you. Otherwise, thank you very much.